We've got a couple more clips to look at today pertaining to the race that we have before us, the new look of it, if you will, this time of mainly MSNBC and I believe a CNN clip as well of pundits putting Trump's candidacy into perspective, the perspective that they should have been focusing on the entire time because, hey, I mean, not much has changed on his side, but it is now hard to ignore given the narrative about Biden has to end with Kamala stepping in. So let's view a few of these and just jump in with some context.
The old man in the race now is Donald Trump. 78 years old and only occasionally coherent, with a record as president that is viewed by historians as the worst in the history of the country, a tenure that ended in violence. And he refuses to promise that there won't be more violence to come from his supporters. He is the old man in the race by a mile, dragging that legacy from what happened the last time he was in office, and now a national abortion ban and maybe his own prison sentence with him to the polls. And as of today, we know that his opponent will not be a man older than him. As of today, we know his opponent will be a 59-year-old former prosecutor, attorney general, U.S. senator, and vice president to Joe Biden, who cemented his legacy today with a decision that will go down in history as one of the most selfless, patriotic sacrifices of any sitting president ever.
MAGA can't hide behind just pointing fingers now. They have to face the music that their candidate is the delusional old man, the oldest person to get the nomination ever, who rambles incoherently and says things like George Washington won the Revolution in 1776 by controlling the airports. Those on the ground at the Republican convention had reported that by the end of his almost 2-hour-long speech, many there were sleeping on their phones or had gotten up and literally just walked out and left, as he went off script and largely made no sense while he was talking. 49% of all voters, 62% of Republicans think that, or Republicans who voted in 2020, think that he's mentally unfit for the presidency. And now he can't, again, point at Biden and say, well, more people think that about him. His presidency itself was marred by political violence, calls to that exact kind of violence. You know, there's good people on both sides, major debt, the mishandling of COVID, and losing American jobs for the first time in 6 decades. His only shot to win was to create a worse narrative about Biden, and he no longer has that card to play.
I'll just lay it out like this. We can finish the work that Joe Biden has done to restore our democracy and build our economy, or we can turn the greatest country in the world over to a felon, judged rapist, 6-time bankrupt businessman who sent his friends to violently storm the last office from which he was fired. To me, the choice isn't hard. And it's pretty clear that Kamala Harris would be the best one.
And see, Trump's only response to those claims were, nope, and Biden has dementia, ha ha ha. And now what is he gonna say? This woman has a longer list of qualifications than I do, but she's a DEI hire. There's no competition anymore. There's no slander that he can resort to. He's going to have to run on his record, which is abysmal. And I do truly think this was the best move and Kamala was the right choice. She gets a record to run on that George Trump experience. She has that George Trump, and she can prosecute his crimes in real time on the debate stage or in speeches, as that's literally what she did for a living for 16 years.
Joe Biden defeated Donald Trump in 2020 in an election in which Trump refused to accept the result and tried to stay in power by the use of violent force. Trump has since been convicted of 34 felonies and is awaiting sentencing on those charges. He's facing up to 4 years in prison. He has been found liable for committing sexual assault. He owes literally hundreds of millions of dollars in civil penalties for massive fraud at his business. His business has been found criminally guilty of business fraud, and he owes hundreds of millions of dollars in a civil fraud case. He is the subject of a felony RICO indictment in the state of Georgia. He is also facing federal criminal charges. He is now 78 years old and gives speeches of such rambling incoherence that even his most ardent superfans start wandering off or checking their phones by the time he starts talking about sharks and shower heads and how beautiful you would think he looks if he were to take his clothes off.
And those are all real things that has came out of Trump's mouth during his speeches, as well as, again, George Washington winning the Revolution in 1776 by controlling airplanes. And it's all funny because MAGA voters who said that, well, no one in their right mind should vote for an incoherent old man are now going to have to do that for the only one in the race when there's a much better alternative. Donald Trump put his ego first, has done that since 2016, and it's a large part of the reason that Republicans have not won anything since. They lost in 16 and 18 and 20 and 2022, and now they're gearing up to get destroyed in 2024 with the most unelectable candidate of all time who wouldn't step aside for the good of his party or the good of the country or any of these things like the selfless act that Biden just did. And I, for one, cannot wait to see how these campaigns turn out, watch the debates, and to see the landslide of a Democratic victory in November.